The cruel laughter reached Iona Pell before the wagon did. It floated up the mountain road in thin, ugly pieces, carried by the same cold wind that pulled at her worn brown shawl and pushed loose strands of dark hair across her round face. She stood behind a cracked window in an abandoned house high above the town of Bellweather, watching three respectable women point toward the ridge as if they could see her through the trees. They could not, but that had never stopped them from speaking about her. To them, Iona was no longer the widow who had once filled their empty cupboards during a hard winter. She was the enormous, foolish wife of a dead criminal, hiding in a rotting house because shame had finally become too heavy for even her broad shoulders to carry. What they did not know was that beneath the loose floorboard at Iona's feet lay enough evidence to ruin the most powerful man in the county. What Iona did not know was far worse. Somewhere among the people who had once eaten at her table was the person who had betrayed her husband and sent him to his death. The wagon passed below the ridge and rolled out of sight. Iona stayed by the window until the sound of its wheels faded. Only then did she release the curtain. Her heavy arms trembled, though she hated that they did. She had spent months telling herself that cruel words were only air. Air could not bruise skin or break bone. Still, the words found old wounds and pressed against them. She crossed the cold room, careful of the weak boards, and lowered herself into the only chair that did not wobble. The mountain house had once belonged to the Saye family. It had been empty for almost 12 years, and it showed. Rain came through 2 places in the roof. Mice owned the pantry. Wind slipped through the walls at night and made the house sigh like an unhappy sleeper. Iona had covered one window with a flour sack and stuffed rags beneath the door, but the October cold still settled deep inside the rooms. She reached toward the little iron stove and warmed her hands above its weak flame. Her fingers were red and rough. Before Thomas died, people had called those hands generous. They remembered the loaves she kneaded, the blankets she mended, and the bowls of stew she carried to families too proud to ask for help. After Silas Vane called Thomas Pell a thief, the same hands became proof of something shameful. Mrs. Abernathy had looked at Iona's thick fingers in the mercantile and said loudly that greed always showed itself somewhere. A few women laughed. One glanced at Iona's full body and said there was certainly no mystery about where all the stolen money had gone. Iona had walked out without the lamp oil she needed. She made it halfway home before she began to cry. Not graceful tears, but broken, gasping sobs that shook her large frame and left her leaning against a tree because her knees would not hold her. She had been ashamed of the crying too. That was the worst part. Other people had chosen cruelty, yet somehow she had carried the shame of it. A sound came from outside. Iona froze. It was not the nervous scratch of a branch. It was the firm snap of weight on dead wood. Someone was coming up the path. She stood quickly, knocking her chair backward. The little stove door rattled. Her tired hazel eyes moved toward the loose board near the wall. She had just enough time to pull the rug over it before another step sounded from the porch. Iona reached for the fireplace poker. It was a poor weapon, but she held it in both hands and waited. The front door opened. A tall man filled the doorway. He wore a dark wool coat faded at the shoulders, heavy boots, and a beard that looked as if he cut it with a hunting knife whenever it became inconvenient. Snow had begun to melt in his black hair. A rifle rested across one arm, not pointed at her, but close enough to matter. His face was lean and weathered, and his gray eyes moved slowly over the room before settling on Iona. For one long moment, neither spoke. Then the stranger said, "Put down the poker." Iona tightened her grip. "Put down the rifle." His expression barely changed. "This is my house." "Then you have neglected it terribly." That surprised him. She saw it in the slight lift of his eyebrows. He stepped inside and closed the door against the wind. Alden Saye. The name struck her harder than the cold. Everyone in Bellweather knew the Saye name, though few had seen Alden in years. His father had built the mountain house before losing most of the family land in a disputed claim. His mother had died soon after. Alden had disappeared into the high country and become the kind of man towns turned into rumors. Some said he trapped wolves with his bare hands. Others said he had killed a partner over a gold claim. Iona had never believed either tale. Bellweather made monsters whenever the truth was too quiet to entertain it. Iona Pell, she said. His eyes sharpened. Thomas Pell's widow. There it was. The pause, the careful look. She had seen both 100 times. If you came to stare, she said. The women down the mountain do it with more imagination. I came because the property is mine. It was empty. Empty does not mean abandoned. Iona almost laughed at that. She looked around at the sagging ceiling, the broken cabinet, and the moss growing between stones near the hearth. The roof might disagree. Alden set his rifle beside the door. He did not smile, but something in his face eased. How long have you been here? 4 months. Alone? That is usually what hiding means. He looked at the thin blanket folded near the stove, the small sack of beans, and the patched boots beside the wall. His gaze passed over her body without lingering. That should not have mattered, but it did. Men in town either stared too long or looked away too quickly, as if her size were a private failure they were embarrassed to witness. Alden only looked at her as he looked at everything else in the house, trying to understand what had happened there. You will have to leave, he said. The words landed with a dull finality. Iona set down the poker because her hands had begun to shake. Give me until morning. The weather is turning. Then give me 2 mornings. Where will you go? That is not your concern. You are in my house, Mrs. Pell. It has become my concern. She lifted her chin. Do not call me Mrs. Pell in that careful voice. I know what they say about Thomas. If you believe it, say so plainly. Alden removed his gloves 1 finger at a time. I have been away from Bellweather for 11 years. I do not know what they say. Then you may be the only fortunate person left in Colorado. She turned from him before he could see tears rising in her eyes. She hated how close they always were now. Grief seemed to have changed the very shape of her. It lived in her full cheeks, in the tired skin beneath her eyes, and in the weight of every breath. She crossed to the stove and adjusted the pot, even though it did not need adjusting. Behind her, Alden walked into the next room. His steps were slow. Dust shifted beneath his boots. Iona listened, wondering whether she could gather the records and escape through the back before he returned. But the mountain was already turning white, and the nearest shelter was 6 miles away. The floor is loose in here, he called. Her heart stopped. Iona rushed into the narrow bedroom. Alden was kneeling beside a plank near the wall, working his fingers beneath its edge. It was not the board where she had hidden Thomas's papers, but fear still rushed through her. Leave it, she said too sharply. He looked up. Why? Because the whole floor may give way. It will not. He lifted the plank. Beneath it lay a small tin box, grey with age. Alden stared at it as if it had spoken his name. He drew it out, wiped the dust with his sleeve, and opened the rusted clasp. Inside were several dried flowers, a faded blue ribbon, and 1 folded letter. His hands became very still. My mother's, he said. Iona stepped closer despite herself. The paper crackled as he unfolded it. Alden read in silence at first. Then his eyes moved back to the top and began again more slowly. What is it? Iona asked. He did not answer. She might have respected his silence if he had not suddenly looked at her with suspicion. Why are you here? He asked. I told you. I needed a place to hide. Why this place? Thomas knew it was empty. Alden rose. How did he know? He was a land assessor. He knew every property record in the county. He held out the letter, though he did not release it when she reached for it. Read the last lines. Iona leaned close. The writing was delicate and faded, but still clear enough. If anything happens to me, the trouble began in Bellweather. The claims are being changed after they are signed. Mr. Pell suspects it too, though he is young and does not yet understand how dangerous honest questions can be. Do not trust the seal simply because it belongs to a respected man. Iona read the words twice. "Mr. Pell," she whispered. "Thomas's father?" "No. Thomas began assisting the county assessor when he was 17. Your mother must have known him then." Alden pulled the letter back. "My mother died after falling from a horse. I am sorry. She hated horses." The wind pushed against the house. Somewhere above them, an old beam groaned. Iona looked into Alden's face and saw the first crack in his hard control. It was not fear, it was recognition, the terrible moment when an old pain rearranged itself around a new possibility. "Thomas died after his wagon went over Miller's Cut," she said softly. "They called it an accident." Alden met her eyes. She continued, "Thomas hated that road." He lowered the letter. "Show me what you are hiding." Iona took a step back. "I do not know you. You knew my mother enough to read her warning. That does not make you trustworthy." "No," he said. "It does not." His agreement unsettled her more than an argument would have. He returned the letter to the tin box and carried it into the main room. Iona followed. Alden placed more wood in the stove, then removed his wet coat and hung it near the door. He moved as though he had decided something. "The storm will close the lower trail before dark," he said. "You can stay until it opens. And after that? After that, we will see." "We! My mother named your husband in a letter she hid beneath the floor. Your husband later died while investigating land records. I would like to know why." Iona stared at him. For months, officials had sighed when she mentioned the records. Neighbors had told her grief had confused her. Sheriff Morrow had placed both palms on his desk and explained that widows sometimes invented enemies because accepting an accident was too painful. Even Reverend Hale had advised her to pray for the humility to release her anger. Now this rough stranger had read 4 faded lines and believed there was a question worth asking. That small mercy nearly broke her. She turned quickly and knelt by the loose board beneath the rug. Her fingers struggled at the edge. Alden came closer, but did not help until she nodded. Together, they lifted the plank. Iona removed a cloth-wrapped bundle and held it against her chest. "These are copies," she said. "Not all of them. Thomas hid originals somewhere before he died. I have not found them." She opened the cloth on the table. Letters, tax notices, survey maps, and pages of figures spread beneath the weak lamplight. Thomas's handwriting moved through the margins in tight, neat lines. Alden stood across from her, reading without touching. "Silas Vane," he said when the name appeared for the 3rd time. "He owns the sawmill, the North Mine, and nearly half the valley. He also holds the debt on most farms that survived last winter. My father lost our lower acreage to him. Thomas believed Silas had help inside the county office. Dates were changed, boundaries moved, a missed tax notice would be filed even when a family had paid. Then Silas would purchase the property for almost nothing." Alden studied a survey map. "This line is wrong. How do you know?" "I grew up beside that creek. It turns east before the Black Ridge." He traced the ink with one rough finger. "This version gives Vane every stand of cedar worth cutting." Thomas said the same. The room grew darker while they worked. Snow tapped softly at the windows. Iona explained how Thomas had begun noticing repeated errors after the Webb family lost their orchard. He had confronted County Clerk Orson Pike, who blamed careless copying. A week later, Thomas discovered that the official seal had been pressed onto deeds on nights when the office was closed. He began keeping his own record. Then Silas accused him of taking bribes to alter assessments. "They searched our house in front of the whole street," Iona said. "Sheriff Morrow found money in Thomas's desk, $200, more than we had ever kept at home." "Planted?" "Of course it was planted." Her voice rose. "Thomas would not steal a penny." Alden looked at her evenly. "I did not say he would." Iona pressed her lips together. "I am sorry. Do not apologize for defending him." She sat down, suddenly tired. "Everyone else asks whether I truly knew my own husband. They say men keep secrets. They do." The words hurt more than she expected. Alden saw it. "Honest men keep secrets too," he added. Sometimes because they are afraid. Thomas was afraid near the end. Did he tell anyone besides you what he found? Iona looked toward the window. Nathan Rook, his oldest friend. Can he be trusted? Nathan carried Thomas home after the accident. He arranged the burial when I could barely stand. He brought food after everyone else stopped coming. That was not my question. Iona's hand closed around the edge of the table. Yes, he can be trusted. Alden said nothing, but his silence felt like doubt. They worked until the lamp oil ran low. Alden repaired the shutter and dragged an old cot from the loft. Without discussion, he placed it near the kitchen while leaving the warmer bedroom to Iona. She noticed but did not thank him. Gratitude had become dangerous. Every small kindness made her want to trust, and trust now felt like stepping onto river ice. In the morning, the world beyond the windows was white. Snow covered the trail and weighed down the pines. Iona woke to the smell of coffee. For one confused instant, she believed Thomas was alive. He had always risen first, always made coffee too strong, and always whistled when he thought she was asleep. Then she heard Alden moving in the kitchen, and grief returned with quiet precision. She dressed beneath the blanket, pinned her thick hair into a heavy knot, and entered the main room. Alden stood at the stove frying 2 small pieces of salt pork. He had found another shirt in the supplies tied to his pack. Without the coat, he looked broader than she had realized. "You cook?" she asked. "Enough to remain alive. That is not always the same thing." He glanced at her. "There is coffee." She poured a cup. It was terrible, bitter enough to wake the dead. She drank it anyway. Alden set a plate before her with the larger piece of pork. She looked from the food to him. "I do not need extra," she said. "I did not say you did. People often decide what I need by looking at me. Then people have too much time." His answer was so plain that she almost smiled. Almost. After breakfast, they returned to the records. Alden discovered small cuts near the edges of several pages. When placed in order, the marks lined up like parts of a code. Thomas had numbered the documents without writing numbers. Iona felt a stab of pride. Her husband had always loved simple puzzles. At harvest dinners, he entertained children by hiding messages in ordinary lists. "There are pages missing," Alden said. "The originals, or a guide telling us where they are." They searched the bundle again. Inside the back cover of Thomas's pocket ledger, Iona found a sentence she had overlooked because it looked like a reminder about flour. Miriam kept winter wheat above the empty hearth, where summer rain could never touch it. Alden read it and frowned. "My mother was Miriam. Does this house have another hearth?" The old smoke room. They crossed the yard through knee-deep snow. Iona's boots sank with each step, and the cold caught beneath her skirts. Alden went ahead, clearing a path without commenting on her slower pace. The smoke room leaned behind the house, nearly hidden by pines. Its stone hearth was packed with leaves and old nests. They searched the mantel, the chimney base, and the ceiling beams. "Above the empty hearth," Iona murmured. She tilted her head back. A narrow shelf ran near the roof, invisible from the doorway. On it rested a rotted grain sack. Alden found a ladder. "Stay there," Iona bristled. "I am not made of glass." "The ladder is." He climbed before she could argue. When he touched the sack, it fell apart. Dust and dry grain poured over his head. Iona covered her mouth, but laughter escaped. It was the first real laugh she had made since Thomas died, and the sound startled both of them. Alden climbed down with wheat in his beard and a small metal cylinder in his hand. "You look dignified," Iona said. "I felt dignity leave me halfway up." She laughed again. This time Alden's mouth curved at one corner. The cylinder held a rolled strip of paper, but it was not an original deed. It was another letter from Miriam Saye, written shortly before her death. She described seeing Orson Pike meet Silas Vane in the county records room after midnight. She had gone there because a notice claimed the Saye family had failed to pay tax on their lower pasture. Miriam found their receipt missing from the official book. When she confronted Pike, he warned her that a woman raising a son alone should be careful about making enemies. At the bottom she had written, "I sent a copy of everything to Harlan Crow, the circuit judge in Denver. If the local seal cannot be trusted, find one beyond Silas Vane's reach." Alden's face hardened. She knew, and she tried to fight. "She never told me. You were young. I was 23. Young enough for a mother to be afraid." He turned away. Snow moved through a crack in the wall and melted against his hair. Everyone said grief made her careless. My father had died the year before. They said she rode too fast because she was angry. Iona understood what he was not saying. They had used grief to make Miriam unreliable, just as they had used it against Iona. A grieving woman was too emotional to believe, and too broken to fear. "Alden," she said gently, "your mother may have hidden this because she hoped you would find it only if you needed it, or because she knew she was in danger. Both can be true." He folded the letter with great care. "The trail will open tomorrow if the sun holds. We are going into town." Fear moved through Iona so quickly that she felt sick. "No, we need to see the county books. They will not let me near them. Then they can refuse me." "You do not understand!" "Silas will know I am here. Nathan is the only person who knows I survived the road to my sister's house. He told everyone I had gone east. If Nathan kept that secret, he may help us. You questioned whether I should trust him last night. I question everyone. That must be a lonely way to live." The words struck their mark. Alden went very still. Iona regretted them, but he spoke before she could apologize. "Lonely is safer than foolish." "Perhaps, but it does not look much like living." He walked back toward the house without answering. The next morning, they went down the mountain. Iona wore her only black dress, faded at the elbows and tight across the arms. She had mended its hem so often that the stitches looked like a second border. Before leaving, she stood in the bedroom and tried to arrange her hair. Her hands would not cooperate. She could already hear Mrs. Abernathy's voice and the laughter in the mercantile. Alden appeared in the doorway. "The horses are ready. I need another moment." His eyes met hers in the cracked mirror. "You are afraid. How observant. I did not mean it as an insult. They will." She pulled at the front of her dress. "They will look at this and see proof that I am ruined. They will look at me and decide, grief has made me uglier, larger, weaker. Then they will laugh before I have spoken a word." Alden leaned against the frame. "When I look at you, I see a woman carrying papers that powerful men are afraid to have read." Iona's hands stopped. "Then look at me often today," she whispered. "I may need reminding." He gave one slow nod. "I can do that." Bellweather sat in a narrow valley between dark green slopes. The main street was muddy from melting snow. Wagons stood outside the feed store and the mercantile. Smoke rose from chimneys beneath a pale sky. Nothing had changed, and that felt almost insulting. Iona had imagined grief should alter the world enough for others to see it. Instead, the bakery still displayed apple cakes. The barber still argued outside his shop. Children still chased a hoop near the church steps. Heads began to turn before Iona and Alden reached the hitching rail. Mrs. Abernathy came out of the mercantile with Cora Finch and Lillian Dove. All three stopped. Mrs. Abernathy's eyes traveled over Iona's dress and settled on the worn cloth stretched across her middle. "Well," she said, "the mountain has returned what it could not swallow." Cora laughed behind one gloved hand. "I had heard she ran east. Perhaps no coach had a seat broad enough," Lillian said. Their laughter was soft, practiced, and meant to sound respectable. Iona felt heat rush into her face. Every old instinct begged her to lower her eyes and hurry away. Instead, she remembered Alden's words. She looked beside her. He was looking directly at her, not at them. Iona took a breath. "Good morning, ladies." Mrs. Abernathy blinked, disappointed by the absence of tears. Iona continued toward the courthouse. Alden walked beside her. He did not threaten the women or defend her with some grand speech. He simply matched his pace to hers, making it clear that she was not alone. Inside the courthouse, County Clerk Orson Pike sat behind a polished counter. He was a narrow man with pale hands and a gold watch chain across his vest. When he saw Iona, His pleasant public smile disappeared. "Mrs. Pell," he said, "I thought you had left the county. People think many things." His gaze shifted to Alden. "Mr. Saye, it has been a long time. I want the assessment books for the Saye property from 12 years ago." Pike folded his hands. "Old records require a written request. Then give me paper. The archive is undergoing repair." It looked solid from outside. Pike's mouth tightened. "I mean, the records are being reorganized. Then you should know where they are." Iona watched a pulse move in Pike's temple. He opened a drawer, removed one sheet of paper, and placed it on the counter. "You may submit a request. Review takes 30 days. State law allows a property owner to inspect records related to his land during business hours," Iona said. Pike's eyes moved to her. "You are hardly in a position to lecture this office about law. The law does not change with my position." The door opened behind them. Silas Vane entered as if summoned by his own name. He was in his early 50s, silver-haired and carefully dressed, with the easy smile of a man who had purchased every welcome he ever received. 2 local businessmen followed him. Silas removed his hat and looked at Iona with warm concern. "Mrs. Pell," he said loudly, "how relieved we are to see you safe. The entire town has worried." It was a beautiful lie. Several people in the hall turned to listen. "Did the entire town worry before or after laughing?" Iona asked. Silas's smile held. "Grief can make harmless remarks feel cruel, and guilt can make cruel acts appear harmless." The hallway fell silent. Silas looked toward Alden. "I see the mountain has given you unusual company." "I choose my own company," Alden said. "As did your father. It cost him dearly." Alden's eyes became cold. "Is that a warning?" "Only history." Silas turned back to Iona. "Your husband caused pain to many families. I understand why you wish to rewrite what happened, but continuing this display will only deepen your humiliation." Iona's throat tightened. She could feel everyone watching the tired widow in the strained dress. Silas expected her to cry. Perhaps he even wanted it. Her tears would become proof of instability before they touched her cheek. She stepped closer to him. "Thomas found something you were afraid of." For less than a second, Silas's smile vanished. Then it returned. "Thomas found money that was not his." "No, someone placed money in his desk. Do you have evidence? Would you like me to?" That time the silence belonged to Iona. Silas studied her face. "Take care on the mountain, Mrs. Pell. The roads can be dangerous." Alden moved between them, but Iona caught his sleeve. "We are done here," she said. They left without the records. Outside, Iona walked past the curious faces until she reached the narrow alley behind the blacksmith shop. Then her knees weakened. She placed both hands against the wall. "Breathe," Alden said. "Do not command me. Then consider it a suggestion." She drew in air, but it came sharply. "I wanted to strike him. I noticed. I wanted to make him afraid." "You did." Iona turned. "No. Men like Silas do not fear women like me. He followed us into that office within 5 minutes of our arrival. He refused to let Pike handle you alone. And when you asked whether he wanted evidence, he stopped breathing." She remembered the small break in Silas's smile. "He is afraid," Alden said. "That means we are close to something." A voice came from the far end of the alley. "Iona?" Nathan Rook stood beside a stack of barrels. He was a plain, broad-faced man, with sandy hair and the gentle manner of someone accustomed to calming frightened animals. Thomas had loved him like a brother. Nathan had sat beside Iona through the long night after Thomas's death, saying little while she gripped his hand. Seeing him now brought such sudden relief that she almost ran to him. "Nathan." He crossed the alley and embraced her. His arms tightened around her shoulders, and for a moment Iona allowed herself to rest. Then he drew back, worry filling his face. "Why are you here? I told everyone you went east." "We found something." His eyes flicked toward Alden. "Who is this?" "Alden Saye. The mountain house belongs to him." Nathan's expression changed so slightly that another person might not have noticed, but grief had taught Iona to study every room for danger. "Saye," Nathan said. I thought you were gone for good." "So did I," Alden replied. Iona explained the hidden letter, though she did not mention the documents beneath the floor. Nathan listened with his hands in his coat pockets. "You need to stop," he said when she finished. The words stunned her. "What?" "Silas already destroyed Thomas's name. If he learns you have records, he may do worse." "He does know." Nathan went pale. "Iona, I cannot keep hiding. You can stay at my place. We will tell people you came back because you were ill." "I am not ill. You know what I mean." His gaze moved over her worn dress. "Look at you. You have been freezing and half-starving up there while people turn you into a joke." She stepped away. "Do not look at me with pity. I am trying to protect you." That is what Sheriff Morrow says whenever he refuses to listen. Pain crossed Nathan's face. "I buried my best friend. Do not compare me to Morrow." Iona softened. "Then help me." Nathan looked toward the street, where Silas's carriage waited outside the courthouse. "Thomas once gave me a key," he said quietly. "He told me it opened a cabinet in the old assessor's office. I thought it was only a spare. After he died, the county closed that room." "Do you still have it?" Alden asked. Nathan nodded. "At my house." "Bring it to the mountain tonight," Iona said. "The trail is bad. You know the way." He hesitated, then nodded. "After dark." As Nathan left, Iona felt hope for the first time that day. Alden watched him go with narrowed eyes. "Do not," she said. "Do not what?" "Turn every hesitation into guilt. He told you to stop, then offered a key once you refused. Because he is afraid. Fear makes people unpredictable. So does loneliness." Alden's face closed. Iona knew she had reached the old wound again. They rode back in silence. Nathan did not come that night. Iona waited beside the window until the lamp burned low. Every few minutes she lifted the curtain and searched the dark trail for movement. Alden sat at the table cleaning his rifle, though Iona suspected it had not needed cleaning for several years. The quiet scrape of cloth against metal marked the passing time. "He may have been delayed," she said. "He may have. The road is difficult after dark." "It is." She turned from the window. "If you have something to say, please stop hiding it inside those short answers." Alden laid the rifle across the table. "You would not like what I have to say. I have survived things I did not like. Nathan knew you were hiding on the mountain. Silas did not know until today. Nathan told us about a key only after Silas saw you. Now Nathan is missing." Iona's stomach tightened. "You think he went to Silas?" "I think we should move the papers." That is not the same answer. It is the only useful one tonight. She hated him for being calm. She hated herself more for knowing he was right. Together they wrapped the records in oilcloth. Alden carried them outside and hid them in a narrow space behind a loose stone in the smokeroom chimney. They kept only Miriam's letter and one harmless copy of a boundary map in the house. Near midnight, a horse approached. Iona hurried to the door. Alden caught her wrist before she reached the latch. "Wait! It is Nathan!" Then waiting 10 seconds will not harm him. The horse stopped below the porch. A shadow moved past the window. Alden lifted his rifle. Iona took the poker again, feeling foolish and frightened at once. The door burst inward. A man with a cloth over his face rushed into the room. He kicked the table aside and went straight toward the loose floorboard. Alden struck the man's shoulder with the rifle stock before he could kneel. The intruder stumbled, grabbed a burning piece of wood from the stove, and threw it toward the bedroom curtain. Fire climbed the dry cloth in a bright orange line. Iona did not scream. She seized the water bucket and threw it across the flames. The first splash darkened the curtain, but did not stop the fire. She ripped the burning cloth from its nail with her bare hands, dropped it to the floor, and smothered it beneath a wool blanket. Behind her, the intruder drove his elbow into Alden's ribs and escaped through the open door. Alden ran onto the porch, but stopped at the edge. The horse was already crashing down the trail. Iona stood above the smoking blanket, breathing hard. A red burn crossed one palm. Alden returned and took her hand. "Let me see." "It is nothing." "Iona." She allowed him to lead her to the table. He poured cool water over her palm. then wrapped it in a clean strip torn from his spare shirt. His fingers were careful, almost gentle enough to hurt. "Did you see who it was?" she asked. "No. Was it Nathan?" Alden tied the cloth. "I do not know." That honest answer frightened her more than certainty. In the mud below the porch, they found a brass key. Iona recognized the small nick near its head. Thomas had made that mark on every key he cut, a habit from his years in the assessor's office. "Nathan had it," she said. Alden picked it up with a cloth. "That does not prove he dropped it. You were ready to accuse him an hour ago. I was ready to doubt him. That is different." Iona pressed her bandaged hand against her chest. "If Nathan came here to burn the papers, why bring the one thing that could help us find more? Perhaps he did not know it fell. Or someone took it from him." Alden looked down the dark trail. "We will find out in daylight." Neither slept. Alden repaired the broken latch while Iona cleaned soot from the floor. Near dawn, he sat beside her on the porch. The storm had passed, leaving the sky deep blue above the white peaks. Iona's shoulders ached. Her hair had fallen loose and hung in thick waves down her back. She no longer cared how she looked. "Who betrayed you?" she asked. Alden rested his forearms on his knees. "What makes you think someone did? You trust a tree more than a person, and only because a tree cannot follow you into town." For a while, he watched the sky brighten. "His name was Ezra Cole," he said at last. "We worked a silver claim west of Leadville. I found the vein, he found the investors. We signed everything as equal partners. What happened? He moved the boundary stakes and filed the claim in his name. My intended wife, Clara, testified that I had agreed to it." Iona turned toward him. "Why would she? Ezra offered her a safer life. And you left." "I fought for a year. I spent everything. When the court ruled against me, I left." "You left people too!" His jaw tightened. "People had made their choice." "Two people made a choice. You punished the whole world for it. You hid in an empty house for 4 months. The truth of that silenced her." Alden continued more softly. "We both called hiding survival, because it sounded better." Iona stared at the valley. Perhaps it was survival at first. And now? She thought of Silas's brief fear in the courthouse. Now it is becoming surrender. At sunrise they rode to Nathan's farm. His house stood in a field of cut hay, small but carefully kept. The barn door hung open. One horse was gone, and another stamped nervously in its stall. Iona called Nathan's name. No one answered. Inside, a chair lay on its side. A cup had shattered beside the hearth. There was no blood, but mud marked the floor. Alden knelt near a print. 2 men, he said. One wore a narrow town boot, the other had a split heel. The man at the house, his right heel was split. Iona searched the bedroom. Nathan's coat was missing, but his work gloves remained. In a drawer she found a folded notice from the Vane Land Company. It demanded payment of a debt Nathan had never mentioned. If he failed, Silas would take the farm at the end of the month. He owed Silas, she said. Alden read the amount. More than this place is worth. On the back, Nathan had written Thomas's name 3 times, each one crossed out. Iona sat on the edge of the bed. She remembered Nathan bringing a basket after the funeral. He had placed bread, cheese and apples on her table and refused payment. He had told her Thomas spoke of her in every conversation. When the church women stopped visiting, Nathan continued to come. Was it kindness or guilt? He may still be in danger, she said. Yes. You think he betrayed Thomas? I think Silas owned his debt and Thomas trusted him. That is a dangerous combination. Iona closed her eyes. I cannot accuse him without proof. Then we use the key. The old assessor's office occupied a narrow brick building behind the courthouse. It had been closed since a new records wing opened 2 years earlier. Nathan's key fit the rear door. They waited until Sunday morning, when most of Bellweather gathered at church. Iona had once sat in the second pew with Thomas. Now she and Alden crossed the empty street, while the congregation sang a hymn about mercy. The office smelled of dust, ink, and damp paper. Shelves leaned beneath old tax books. A row of locked cabinets stood along the back wall. The key opened the third cabinet. Inside were no records, only a false wooden panel. Alden pressed one side, and the panel shifted. Behind it lay a narrow bundle wrapped in Thomas's green scarf. Iona knew the scarf before she touched it. She had knitted it during their first winter together. One end was wider than the other because she had been learning. Thomas wore it every year and claimed the uneven shape kept the wind confused. She held it to her face. It no longer smelled like him, only dust. Still, her body remembered. A sob rose from somewhere deep and escaped before she could stop it. Alden stood near her without speaking. "I made this," she said. "It was a terrible scarf. It looks warm." He said the same thing. Her knees gave way, and she sank to the floor. Alden lowered himself beside her. He did not tell her to be strong. He did not say Thomas was in a better place or that time would soften the pain. He simply stayed while she cried into the scarf. When the worst of it passed, Iona opened the bundle. The original property deeds were there, along with tax receipts bearing real dates. Thomas had also found payment orders from Silas Vane to County Clerk Pike and Sheriff Morrow. The payments were described as security services and record maintenance, but the amounts matched the dates on which families lost land. There was a list of 19 altered properties, including the Saye pasture. At the bottom lay a sealed letter addressed to Iona. "My dearest heart, if you are reading this, I have failed to return safely or failed to explain what I found. Forgive me for keeping danger from you. I told myself it was protection, but perhaps I was only afraid to see fear in your eyes." The records prove Silas and Pike changed claims. Morrow helped frighten families who questioned them, but they learned I was watching because Nathan told them. He came to me last night and confessed. Silas held his farm debt and threatened his younger sister's home. Nathan swears he believed they only meant to dismiss me. I want to forgive him, but I do not yet know if I can. He agreed to help me bring the evidence to Judge Crow. If something happens before we leave, trust the documents, not any man's promise. And know this above everything: you were the bravest and kindest part of my life. Nothing they say about me can change what we were. Nothing they say about you can change who you are. The letter blurred. Iona pressed it flat with her bandaged hand. "Nathan," she whispered. Alden read over her shoulder. Thomas knew. He was going to forgive him. He said he did not know. But he still planned to go with him to the judge. Her voice broke. Nathan knew the road Thomas would take. He knew the hour. He knew everything. A noise came from the front room. Alden rose at once. The office door opened, and Nathan stepped inside. His face was bruised. One eye was swollen. His coat was torn at the shoulder. He stopped when he saw the green scarf in Iona's lap. No one spoke. Nathan closed the door behind him. "You found it." Iona stood slowly. "You told Silas." He looked down. Yes. The single word was almost too small to contain the damage it had caused. "Why?" she asked. "He had the note on my farm. My father borrowed from him before he died. The amount kept growing. Silas said if I told him what Thomas was doing, he would clear it." "So you sold my husband for a field?" Nathan flinched. "I thought Silas would have Pike dismiss him. I thought Thomas would lose his position, not his life." "You knew Silas." "Not like I do now." Iona crossed the room until she stood before him. Nathan had to look down to meet her eyes, but he seemed smaller than she had ever seen him. "Did you place the money in our desk?" His silence answered. Iona slapped him. The sound cracked through the little office. Pain flashed through her burned palm. Nathan did not move or defend himself. "You sat beside me after they found it," she said. "You held my hand while I asked who could hate Thomas enough to do that." Tears filled Nathan's eyes. "I know. You carried his body into my house. I know. Stop saying that." Her voice rose. "You do not know. You went home after the funeral. You slept in your bed. I lay beside the empty place where he had been, and wondered whether the town was right, whether I had failed to know the man I loved. You let me doubt him. You let me doubt myself." Nathan began to cry. Silas sent Morrow after the papers. When they did not find them, Morrow came to me. He wanted the key. I refused. They took me from my house last night. I escaped when the wagon axle broke near the creek. Was it you at the mountain house? Alden asked. No, it was Deputy Crane. His boot has a split heel. Alden and Iona exchanged a look. Nathan reached inside his coat. Alden moved quickly, but Nathan raised an empty hand. He drew out a small account book. Silas keeps private figures in his mill office, Nathan said. I took this when I escaped. It shows payments to Pike, Morrow, and Crane. It also records money promised to me. Iona did not reach for it. Why should I trust anything you bring? You should not. Nathan placed the book on a desk. Trust the figures. Thomas taught me how to read Silas's marks. And trust that I will testify, even if it costs me the farm or sends me to prison. It may. It should. Church bells rang across the street, ending the service. Alden gathered the documents. We need to leave. Nathan shook his head. Silas watches the north and south roads. You will not reach Denver carrying those. There is an eastern mining trail, Alden said. Was, Nathan replied. A slide closed it last spring. Iona looked at the papers. Thomas had tried to take one set of evidence beyond Silas's reach. He had failed because one trusted man knew his route. If they carried a single bundle, Silas only had to stop them once. We make copies, she said. Alden understood immediately. More than one set. 5, Iona said. And no one knows every route. They returned to the mountain house by separate paths. Nathan went first to a widow named Elsie Webb, whose orchard Silas had taken. Iona had fed Elsie's children during the winter fever, and Elsie had never joined the public mockery, though fear had kept her silent. When Nathan told her the truth, she slapped him too. Then she opened her kitchen and found paper. For 2 days, the little house became a copying room. Iona, Alden, Nathan, Elsie and 2 other families worked from dawn until their fingers cramped. They copied deeds, payment orders, Thomas's notes, Miriam's warning, and Silas's private account book. Alden built a wooden frame to hold pages near the stove so fresh ink would dry faster. Iona checked every figure twice. She had managed the Pell household accounts for 15 years and knew how one changed number could ruin an honest family. The work changed the house. It was still cold and damaged, but voices filled it. Elsie brought soup. Mr. Flores carried firewood without being asked. His daughter Sophia sat beside Iona and copied legal descriptions in beautiful, patient handwriting. No one stared at Iona's arms when she rolled up her sleeves. No one counted how many biscuits she ate. They looked to her for decisions, because the evidence belonged first to her grief, and then to all of them. On the second evening, Alden found Iona alone by the smoke room. She was watching sunset turn the snow pink. You should rest, he said. So should you. He stood beside her. Nathan is ready to leave with 1 packet. Do you trust him? No. Iona gave a tired laugh. At least you are consistent. I trust that he is ashamed. Sometimes shame makes a person brave. Sometimes it only makes him desperate. Thomas wanted to forgive him. Do you? She considered the question. Not today. Then do not. The church ladies will tell me forgiveness is freedom. The church ladies were laughing in the street. She looked at him, and a smile touched her mouth. Alden continued. You can release anger when it no longer protects anything worth protecting. No one else should choose the hour for you. Iona's eyes filled, but these tears were different. You say very kind things for a man who works so hard to appear unkind. Do not spread it around. They stood close enough that his sleeve touched hers. Neither moved away. When this is over, Iona said, will you return to the high country? I do not know. That means yes. It means I spent 11 years believing I had no reason to come down. The last week has made me uncertain. Her heart gave one painful, hopeful beat. Alden looked at her face. Iona, I do not know what I am able to promise. Neither do I. Good. Good? A promise made from loneliness can sound like love until morning. She understood. He was not rejecting her. He was protecting something fragile from being named too soon. Iona rested her head briefly against his shoulder. Alden became still, then gently covered her bandaged hand with his. The 5 packets left at different hours. Mr. Flores carried one south beneath sacks of feed. Sophia took another west on the morning coach, posing as a girl visiting an aunt. Elsie sent a third with a traveling doctor. Nathan carried the 4th toward the railroad, taking a route only he knew. Alden kept the 5th, but it was a false packet, filled mostly with blank pages and several copies that could be lost without destroying the case. Silas's men stopped Alden before noon. Sheriff Morrow and Deputy Crane blocked the mountain road with rifles resting across their saddles. Silas waited behind them in a polished black carriage. Iona watched from the porch. Fear pressed cold fingers around her heart, but she walked down the steps before Alden could tell her to stay. Silas smiled. "Mrs. Pell, you continue to make this sad matter more difficult than necessary. You came a long way to repeat yourself." Morrow displayed a folded paper. "We have authority to search the property for stolen county records." Alden looked at the seal. "Signed by Pike? Signed by a lawful clerk." "That is not what I asked." The sheriff dismounted. Deputy Crane followed. Iona saw the split in his right boot heel. He noticed her looking and smiled. "Cold night for a fire," she said. His smile faded. They searched the house, overturning mattresses and pulling boards from the floor. Iona stood near Silas while they worked. "You have lost," he told her quietly. "Whatever Thomas hid will disappear. Nathan will run as he did before. Alden will tire of carrying a widow's grief. And when they are gone, this town will remember only what I tell it." The words struck every private fear she carried. For one moment she saw the future he described, herself alone. Thomas disgraced, Alden gone, laughter following her until she died. Then she looked at the torn room and understood something simple. Silas needed her to believe that other people's choices defined her life. That had always been his real power. "You still do not understand me," she said. "I understand exactly what you are. A lonely woman begging the world to make her husband innocent. Thomas was innocent before anyone believed it. And I had dignity, while your friends mocked my body, my clothes, and my grief. Their laughter did not remove it. Your lies did not remove it. You cannot take what you never gave me." Silas's pleasant expression hardened. Morrow emerged with Alden's packet. "Found it." Silas took the bundle and opened it. Satisfaction returned to his face when he saw Thomas's copied notes. "Burn it," he said. Morrow looked toward Iona. "Here? Here?" Deputy Crane dropped the pages into the yard and lit them. Flames curled through Thomas's handwriting. Iona forced herself not to look away. Silas wanted to see her break. When the last page blackened, she said, "Was that all?" Silas studied her. "You should return to town." Iona continued. The mail coach arrives before supper. For the first time, real uncertainty crossed his face. 3 days later, 2 state investigators stepped off that coach. With them came Judge Harlan Crow's daughter, Amelia Crow, who had taken over her father's legal practice after his death. The traveling doctor had delivered Miriam's letter and the evidence packet directly to her. Sophia's packet reached the state land office the next morning. Mr. Flores's copy went to a Denver newspaper. Nathan arrived at the railroad, bruised and exhausted but alive, carrying the 4th. Silas tried to leave Bellweather before sunrise. State officers stopped his carriage at the South Bridge. The investigation lasted 6 weeks. Every day brought another record, another witness, and another family willing to speak. Once people understood that Silas no longer controlled the only judge who would hear them, fear began to loosen. A former clerk admitted Pike ordered him to replace tax pages. A stable boy remembered Sheriff Morrow exchanging horses the night Thomas died. Deputy Crane confessed that Morrow had forced Thomas's wagon toward Miller's Cut. Thomas had tried to turn away, but the road edge collapsed beneath him. The men claimed they only intended to frighten him. The law would decide how much that excuse was worth. The public hearing took place in Bellweather's meeting hall. Nearly every bench was filled. The same women who had mocked Iona in the street sat together near the rear. Mrs. Abernathy wore her finest blue hat and kept her eyes lowered. Iona waited outside until her name was called. She wore the same black dress, but Elsie had helped her repair the sleeves, and Sophia had given her a clean white collar. Iona's dark brown hair was braided and pinned neatly. She was still a very full woman with a round face, heavy arms, and tired hazel eyes. She did not try to hide any of it. Alden stood beside the door. "You do not have to look at them," he said. "Yes, I do." "Why?" "Because I spent months lowering my eyes so they would feel comfortable. I am finished making cruelty comfortable." He opened the door for her. The room fell silent as Iona entered. She heard one bench creak beneath someone shifting. Silas sat at a table with 2 attorneys. Pike and Morrow sat separately under guard. Nathan waited near the witness chairs, pale and worn. Amelia Crowe began with the deeds. One by one, she showed the original boundaries beside the altered versions. Families watched stolen acres return on paper. She presented Silas's account book, bank transfers, false tax notices, and the payments to officials. Then she read Miriam Say's letter aloud. Alden did not move, but Iona saw his hands close at his sides. Nathan testified for nearly 2 hours. He admitted giving Silas information. He admitted planting the money. He admitted remaining silent after Thomas's death, because cowardice and guilt had trapped him together. Silas's attorney tried to make him appear unreliable. "You are a confessed liar," the attorney said. "Yes," Nathan answered. "A debtor." "Yes." "A man hoping to escape punishment by blaming someone wealthier." Nathan looked toward Iona. "I do not expect to escape punishment." When Iona was called, whispers moved through the hall. Amelia asked her to explain how Thomas found the pattern. Iona described the Webb orchard, the Saye pasture, and the repeated changes in dates. Her voice shook at first. Then she saw families listening, not laughing, and it grew steadier. Silas's attorney rose. "Mrs. Pell, you have suffered a terrible loss. Is it possible grief led you to see meaning in ordinary errors?" 19 ordinary errors that all benefited one man, a few people murmured. The attorney frowned. "You hid alone in an abandoned house for months. Would you describe your state of mind as sound?" The old shame returned, hot and familiar. Iona felt every eye touch her worn dress and large body. She knew what the question truly asked. Was she too emotional, too strange, too embarrassing to believe? "No," she said. The attorney looked pleased. "No, my mind was not sound every hour. I cried until I could not breathe. I woke calling my husband's name. I became afraid of footsteps, church bells, and women laughing in the street. Grief harmed me. Cruelty harmed me. Being ignored by officials who should have listened harmed me." The room was completely still. Iona continued, "But pain did not change the numbers. Tears did not redraw the property lines. Loneliness did not place Silas Vane's payments in the sheriff's account. You may prove I was grieving. I have never denied it. You cannot prove I was wrong." Amelia placed Thomas's original ledger beside the county book. The dates matched exactly where the county pages had been replaced. The evidence was clear. Judge Mercer, the state examiner leading the hearing, removed his glasses. The record will state that Thomas Pell's assessment work was accurate, that the money used to accuse him was planted, and that every allegation of fraud made against him was false. Iona stopped breathing. The judge continued speaking about criminal referrals and restored claims, but the words became distant. Thomas was innocent. She had always known it, yet hearing it spoken in a public room opened something she had held shut for months. Iona began to cry. She covered her mouth, but the sobs came hard. Her shoulders shook. For one terrible instant, she felt ashamed again. Then Alden was beside her. He did not hide her from the room. He did not ask her to be quiet. He placed one steady hand at her back, while she wept before everyone who had demanded that she suffer neatly. No one laughed. Elsie Webb cried with her. Mr. Flores removed his hat. Even some of the people who had mocked her lowered their heads. Iona looked across the room at Nathan. Tears ran down his face. She did not smile at him. She was not ready. but she gave one small nod, acknowledging that he had finally told the truth. Silas Vane was taken from the hall under guard. He tried to maintain his proud expression, but the town no longer parted for him. People remained in the aisle, forcing him to pass close enough to see every family he had cheated. Mrs. Abernathy approached Iona outside. Cora and Lillian stood behind her. "Mrs. Pell," she began, "we were misled." Iona waited. "Silas was very convincing. We could not have known." "You did not mock Thomas's records," Iona said. "You mocked my body. Silas did not force you to do that." Mrs. Abernathy's face reddened. "We are trying to apologize." "Then begin with what you did, not with what Silas made you believe." The woman opened her mouth, then closed it. For once, Iona did not rescue her from discomfort. In the months that followed, the court restored property to 11 families. Other claims took longer, but the altered records were no longer hidden. Pike lost his office. Morrow and Crane faced trial. Nathan pleaded guilty to planting the money and interfering with an investigation. Because he testified and helped preserve the evidence, the judge gave him a shorter sentence, but there was still a sentence. Before leaving, Nathan asked to speak with Iona. They met beneath the bare cottonwood outside the courthouse. "I do not ask you to forgive me," he said. "Good. Thomas deserved a better friend." "Yes." He accepted each answer without defense. "When I am released, I will sign the farm to the Pell estate. It is not enough, but it is what I have." "I do not want your farm." "Then give it to one of the families Silas harmed." Iona studied him. "Do that yourself when you return. A good act should not become another burden you place in my hands." Nathan nodded. "You are right." He turned to go. "Nathan," she called. He looked back. "I believe you did not intend for Thomas to die." His face crumpled. "That is not forgiveness," she said. "But it is the truth I can give you today. Thank you." Iona watched the deputy lead him away. Her anger remained, but it no longer burned in every direction. It had found its proper shape. Winter settled over the mountain. Alden repaired the roof of the Saye house, replaced the broken windows, and rebuilt the porch. Iona told herself she remained only because her own home in town held too many memories. Alden never asked when she planned to leave. They learned each other's silences. Iona learned that Alden became quiet when he was worried, and even quieter when he was happy. Alden learned that she hummed while baking, and stopped when memories of Thomas became too strong. On those days, he found useful work nearby without forcing conversation. Iona began helping families prepare their restored claims. People climbed the mountain carrying boxes of old receipts, letters, and deeds. She reviewed each page at the big table where she and Alden had first spread Thomas's records. Word traveled beyond Bellweather. By spring, widows and small farmers from neighboring valleys came to ask for help. One afternoon, Alden built shelves across the main room. "Those are too fine for firewood," Iona said. "They are for records." "Whose records?" "Yours, if you want them." She ran her hand along the smooth pine. "This is your house. You have said that before. It remains true. So does the fact that it was empty until you came." Iona looked at him. "What are you saying?" Alden set down his hammer. He seemed more frightened than he had facing armed men on the road. "I am saying I do not want you to leave." Her heart lifted, but she kept her voice steady. "Because you need someone to organize your papers?" "No. Because my biscuits are better than yours. Everything is better than mine." She smiled. "That is true." He stepped closer. "I do not want to offer you rescue. You did not need me to give you courage. You already had it. I only happened to see it before you remembered." Iona's eyes filled. "And I do not want you to stay, because you are afraid to begin elsewhere," he continued. "If you stay, I want it to be because this life has room for you, exactly as you are. Alden, I love your kindness. I love your temper when someone deserves it. I love that you take up space in a room and somehow make more room for everyone who enters it. I love your face when you discover a number that does not belong. I love that you forced me down from a mountain where I had mistaken loneliness for peace." A tear moved down her round cheek. That is a great deal of talking for you. I prepared. She laughed softly. Alden reached for her hand, but stopped before touching it. May I? Iona placed her hand in his. I loved Thomas, she said. Part of me always will. I know. I am still angry. I still wake afraid. Some days I do not feel brave. I know that too. And I will not become smaller to make your life easier. His grey eyes warmed. I would be disappointed if you tried. She rose onto her toes and kissed him. It was not a desperate kiss or a promise that every wound had healed. It was gentle, uncertain, and honest. Alden touched her face, as if holding something strong and precious at the same time. When they parted, they stayed close, their foreheads resting together, while spring rain began tapping against the new windows. They did not marry that week, or even that season. Iona was not ready to exchange one life for another simply because the ending would please the town. Alden understood. They rebuilt slowly. He reopened the lower Saye pasture after the court returned it. She turned the mountain house into a place where families could bring disputed records without fear. A blue sign appeared beside the trail. Pell and Saye Land Assistance. No fee for those in need. The first time Iona returned to the Bellweather mercantile alone, conversation stopped. She walked past the women who once laughed at her and bought flour, lamp oil, coffee, and a length of green cloth. Her dress was still plain. Her arms were still heavy. Her body had not transformed to make her victory acceptable. She simply no longer carried other people's shame. At the counter, a young widow quietly asked whether Iona might look at a tax notice. Her husband had died the month before, and the clerk claimed she owed a fee she did not understand. Bring every paper you have, Iona said. Come tomorrow. We will read them together. The woman glanced toward Mrs. Abernathy, then back to Iona. What if they say I am being difficult? Iona remembered the abandoned house, the cold stove, and the nights when she thought no one would ever listen. Then let them say it, she replied. Being easy to silence is not the price of being respectable. That evening, Iona climbed the mountain road as the sun lowered behind the peaks. Alden waited on the repaired porch. Light shone from every window of the house that had once been dark. The place no longer sighed in the wind. It held shelves of records, the smell of fresh bread, and the quiet sounds of a life being made with care. Alden came down the steps and took one of her parcels. How was town? He asked. They stared. Did you stare back? Naturally. He smiled and offered his arm. Iona took it, not because she needed help walking, but because she liked the warmth of him beside her. Inside, Thomas's green scarf rested in a cedar box with his letter. Miriam Saye's warning lay framed above the record shelves. Neither memory had been hidden. The dead were honored, the living were accountable, and the truth remained where anyone could see it. Iona paused at the doorway and looked down toward Bellweather. Somewhere below, people still whispered. Towns did not become kind in a single season, and justice did not erase every lonely night that came before it. But the whispers no longer decided who she was. Silas Vane had tried to bury her beneath ridicule. He had expected humiliation to make her quiet, grief to make her unbelievable, and betrayal to make her afraid of every offered hand. Instead, Iona survived long enough to speak. She protected the truth long enough for it to travel beyond the reach of corrupt men. She reclaimed her husband's name without surrendering her own, and she learned that dignity was not a gift a town could grant or withdraw. Her revenge was not violence. It was the public record. It was every stolen acre returned. It was every frightened widow who now knew where to bring her papers. It was Nathan living with the cost of his choice. Silas, hearing honest testimony, spoken where his money could not silence it. And the women, who mocked Iona, watching her walk through town, with her head high. Most of all, her revenge was the warm house behind her and the patient man beside her. It was laughter that no longer belonged to cruel strangers. It was love, arriving without asking her to forget the love she had lost. It was a future built carefully from truth, grief, courage, and the simple wonder of being seen at last.